who Charles Collins was, whether he was even running. I've got a gentleman on my chat room right now who would like to run for president as an independent, and his name's David Koss, and he's a farmer from Iowa. I think we ought to have more farmers in there. I've said anytime a communist regime takes over a country, they go after three classes of people in order. They go after the farmers first because they don't want you being able to feed yourself. They want to go after the self-sufficient family farm. Second, they go after the intelligentsia. Third, they go after the veterans, and the law enforcement are still loyal to the old regime. In our case, that would be the Constitution. And we're in that stage now. Our farmers they've been at war with our farmers from the Civil War. The Civil War was basically a war against farms, wasn't it?
No, the Civil War, who really won the Civil War? The North and South did not win the Civil War. Matter of fact, the losers of the Civil War was our constitutional standing in law and states' rights. That's who lost the Civil War. Who won the Civil War was the international bankers who tried Old Hickory in 1834. He kicked them out. Who tried us in 1812. Who tried us before that in the Revolution. That's who won. And they've been winning ever since. And they took that power that they got us in 1871, and that led us to what they was able to do in 1913. And then what they was able to do in 1933. And you wonder what these dang FEMA camps and stuff were about. Well, guess what? I believe we're going to have another Reconstruction Act. And this time it's going to be on the American people. And your skin color, none of that stuff, I don't think it's going to matter.
Well, they're trying, aren't they trying right now, this whole thing that I talked about with J.T. Reddy, they're trying to start a race war. They're trying to and they want to go after the militias, because the militias are farming again, after Oklahoma City, they're farming again, but they're farming in conjunction with the constitutional county sheriffs.
Well, you got to know why they're doing this. Executive Order 12803, 1992, Daddy Bush privatized the United States, infrastructure and assets and state assets, every road, bridge, hospital, school, prison, for sale. Remember that.
Yes.
There are all countries being sold out to underneath us. They want us to have a little issue so they can have a reason to police us. You can believe they got millions of troops. I don't really know, and that's conspiracy theorists saying they're hiding in our national parks or not. I never actually seen them to say for sure they're telling the truth. But you can believe if we go to Bucking and Raising Hell, you're going to see all kinds of UN troops up our butts. You can believe that. That's not the way to settle this. They're the criminals. We're the law-abiding citizens. We're the victims of this fraud perpetrated upon the American people for 140 years now against our Constitution and our real law in this country. And all we need to do is wake the country up and move forward on our real law. That's all we need to do. We don't need to be crazy and shoot people. We just need to
that's something else, Bruce. I've said one of the problems we have. One of the problems we have is how do we fight evil without becoming evil? I mean, to me, that's what happened in
We're governed by the consent of the governed. Guess what? Wake our people up and, as a group force. They no longer have our consent. It's that easy.
But they
No,
can't.
We fall into that rebel trap and pull a spider into a web, I'm telling you. They're too ready for that. They've been too ready for that.
That's what the NDAA set up, isn't it? Isn't that, don't they plan on you trying to force the troops?
Look at all the Tea Parties and all the hell raising they're doing about take our government back. That's their answer to their Tea Parties. NDAA. And normally it would be unconstitutional, but you got to remember, the real Constitution didn't survive the Civil War. Neither did the real government that it created. And if anyone running against me can prove me wrong on that point, I've already tried to get Richard Newker to debate me on this. He's supposedly looking into the 14th Amendment not being constitutional.
Okay.
In a couple of months, he's never got back with me on it. But we
Look,
live under the correct jurisdiction.
I would say that they are scared to death of you. You got law on your side. You've done the research here, and I would say it because the Rothschilds bought Reuters. They bought. They own all of the, or at least their corporations, and my God, it just blows me away that.
You were mentioning the farmers earlier. You know, Ronald Reagan paid the South African, South Mexican, and Central American farmers. You remember when he subsidized them all their farms so they can have all the farm equipment and everything else? And at the same time, he paid our farmers not to grow. And you notice what happened? Those same countries that got subsidized put their crops on our farmers' plates. And after a couple of years, they quit paying our farmers not to grow. In fact, I even mentioned on my video a movie that I've seen on PBS called America, What Went Wrong. It's made by it's a documentary made by a film studio Entities, Arts and Science. And if you type in films.com, America, What Went Wrong, when you get to that one, you can order this thing, and it shows the IRS tax grant where they've been paying our factories to relocate in other countries. And as of 1992, the taxpayer was paid for 42+ million of our American jobs to relocate in all these other third world countries all over the place. They played one of the two parts on PBS, and PBS never played the second part. Supposedly it was rumored they lost all their grants and had to agree not to play it. I don't know anymore. I paid the $99 to get a copy of it. My house burnt down, but I did watch it a few times before it did. And they were interviewing all the people in these areas that used to have factory jobs. They traced where they went and on what finance they leave. It's a bunch of financial professors and economic experts that put this video together. They're not idiots and militia people with beards that look like they just come out of a cave somewhere. These are all professors that put this video together that carefully show how our middle class has been purposely destroyed. And then the few jobs that we got from imports, they just started taking all of our imports from coming in, the dock workers, and sending most of the imported ships in Mexico to cheaper workers on the dock, and then using their truck drivers to bring it to the warehouses. So our jobs are being lost there too. We can't even make jobs on the imports.
Let me ask you about another situation that very controversial, and I got jumped in this with both feet about 40 years ago. I was doing a little time in prison for having marijuana in the state of Texas, and I wrote a book about our United States. I called it science fiction. It was about the United States 40 years in the future, when marijuana was sold, drugs, laws against victimless crimes had been abolished, and the country was still divided a little bit because all the Christians ran to Texas and everybody that wanted to be free went to the other states. And the economy of the United States was restored by restoring our #1 cash crop that the communists stole from us with the help of William Randolph Hearst in the 30s. And that crop is hemp. Now, how about if our farmers in the 30s, hemp was considered a billion-dollar crop by popular mechanics or popular science, and it disappeared.
Well, look what you can make with hemp. You can make, besides rope, the goes on it. All your old Bibles that lasted any time from 100, 200 years ago were all made on hemp paper. You can make fuel out of it that burns clean. You can make plastic out of it that's biodegradable after 200 years. I mean, look at the jobs that were created. This is to make your head buzzy and whatever the heck else they could say. There's a lot of medicinal for it. They're curing cancer with hemp oil now. I've seen a lot of videos on that. Have you ever seen where Texas gave up the Republic form of government in 1870?
No, sir.
To become a public corporation? That document's on my website also under State of Texas Request Representation and New Form of Government. March 30th, 1870. Whereas the people of Texas have framed and adopted a constitution of state government, which is Republican. Whereas the legislature of Texas elected under said constitution has ratified the 14th Amendment and 15th Amendments to the Constitution of the United States. And whereas the performance of the several acts in good faith is a condition preceding to the representation of the state of Texas in Congress. And they go on to ask for representation in Congress of the United States.
Okay, more about this. Now we've got Ron Paul. I'd like to get your opinion of him too. I've met Ron Paul. He's been a subscriber of mine for many years.
Well, there's one thing he says I like. I hear a lot of wishy-washy stuff about him. I really don't know if he's an evil Mason that does whatever. I can't. But I do know the U.S. Examiner, if you type in U.S. economic history that Ron Paul wants every American to know, part 2, he talks about how we've still been in an ongoing state of national emergency since the Civil War. In fact, the labor code that runs this country today is a martial law jurisdiction from the Civil War. It was created in 1863. But here's something he really says real interesting on part 2. And I even show this in my article. And I'm not really a Ron Paul supporter. I mean, I don't know. I just don't think it's a real government, so I don't see how it's going to do any good. But anyway, about 3 pages into part 2, it says the private laws of the District of Columbia. In 1871, 3 years after the illegal ratification of the 14th Amendment, the government defaulted on its war debts, forcing America into bankruptcy, which resulted is considered the death blow to the United States for America. On February 21st, 1871, England claimed what was theirs according to international law and incorporated a 10-mile square that is Washington, D.C. England also incorporated the American Constitution and named for its new corporations such as the United States of America, U.S., and USA, as well as other titles as declared in the District of Columbia Organic Act of 1871, which I read to you, the Organic Act of 1871, where they gave all the corporation all the powers not inconsistent, which would be consistent with the Constitution. And there's your second Constitution. There's where your 13th Amendment went. The reason you can't find it is you're looking in the wrong Constitution. That's what gets me about all these pro-constitutional liberty groups and everything else. They're out there waving a flag, and they got a copy of the Constitution in their pocket, and it's not even the correct one, and they don't know what's wrong. Or they took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, and they don't have a clue there's two of them. Everything's been doubled. Otherwise, people would have raised heck a long time ago. They had to make it look like nothing happened. I mean, even the General Orders 100, the martial law jurisdiction, the Labor Code of the Civil War, even makes mention of the keeping the martial law jurisdiction in a manner where the civilians, and at least don't have any idea that it's going on. Everything just goes back to normal.
You're running for Congress, but Congress is filled with these people, and they seem to all be right there in the pocket. They're being fed.
You're right. I mean, look at Agenda 51. I got it on my website. Congress was sent it for some ceremonial purposes, basically. They don't have any real authority anymore. They're just the sheep following them. I'm not running for Congress because I think I can make a difference. The only difference I'm going to make is exposing it. Right now, I have a Paul Revere mission, my campaign, and that is if anyone running against me, and I did this in 2010 when I ran for Senate, U.S. Senate here in Florida. Anyone running against me can prove me wrong. I'll quit the race. 2 people running against me then, Snicker and Bobby Bean became my students. Then 1 person proved me wrong, and they won't again. It's just the way I challenge the system to show you I know what I'm talking about. I've been studying this since the mid-'80s, early 90s, and I know it quite well, and I've actually got all the documents enlarged and laminated to 2x3. I could take it on stage and teach it. I know it very well, and that's why they don't touch me. I'm not going to get a debate. I mean, if they do, it won't be about, they won't let me say what I want to say. I mean, you want a solution to all the problems? You want to fix all the problems? Hey, here's a great way to do it. We ain't got to go against nobody. Let's just finish the good works of the Civil War. Let's just finish the good that supposedly come out of it. We ended one kind of slavery, involuntary servitude and slavery. Let's end the rest of slavery. Voluntary servitude and slavery, without the written consent of the enslaved or enslaved, would be unconstitutional, which must be in full possession of all facts and knowledge of this enslavement before he gets consent, or she. How would end the jurisdiction of doing this? And what liberal, what Republican, who would get on the stage and look at the audience in the face and tell them, I'm against this amendment to abolish the rest of slavery? I don't care if they're white, black, or whatever. I can't see nobody. I mean, they'd have to run from it. You would back them into a corner where they'd have to say they're either for some kind of slavery.
All right, let me ask you. You're pointing out basically that we're moving towards even more dire circumstances, right, than we're experiencing right now. You foresee that?
Well, you got to remember when Washington, D.C. incorporated, I also show the last page of the Organic Act, they declared themselves to be the owner and head and successor of said corporations and owners of all property of said corporations. 3 years after making you a corporation. And you're subject to the jurisdiction thereof. I don't like being an owned piece of property. I ain't going there to become a part of that mess. I'm going there to expose it. I was a delegate at the Continental Congress of 2009, We the People. The whole time, I'm the one that formed the 14th Amendment Committee. About 20 people walked out behind me because I taught them. A bunch more would have, but they was all away from home and they had flight reservations and they just kind of stuck at the motel. or more than 20 would have walked out when I did. But I sat there for 9 days teaching these folks with them documents enlarged in the hallway. I'm not in there playing with the 14th Amendment corporate body politic gabber about how to go back to having more gun rights and making one of the fruits of the poison tree a little more sweeter with the 10th Amendment being applied a little more. No, we're talking about getting rid of the tree so there is no poison fruit. Updating the law is constitutional, and the NDAA and all this other crap, the UN Small Arms Treaty, the UN Treaty in and of itself, everything becomes dissolved. You can't supersede the Constitution. It is supreme law of the land. If we get back under it, this other stuff is gone like salt on the flood. It don't mean anything. It's just standing law that's making it apply.
Now, Bruce, trying to unite, I mean, I call programming, I call television, I say they don't call it programming for nothing. People are being programmed, they're being programmed to take these pills. I think we're under a severe attack here. We got chemtrails put in aluminum and barium over your food and your water.
You must have seen my video because I show where I tested that too. I was at the Tampa airport for a couple hours, and all the commercial airplanes flying in circles and wood chapping up and down. None of them had these white trails that just hazed up the sky. But we had these white airplanes with no particular place to go, no restricted airspace, and they were all making these hazy white trails in one direction. The planes would all stop making them at the same point, but keep going. And then coming back the other way, they wouldn't make them. But flying back that same way, they did. So I come home and got me some purified water, cleaned the stainless steel pot when it sprayed over my house a lot. And I went and sent it off, and I showed the water sample test results on my video towards the end, where it came back with barium and aluminum and all that other crap in there. Yeah, you're right, the spraying us.
The snow, my first video was made about 15 years ago called Chemtrails, the video. It's still for sale up on UFO TV. You can still order it from me. But, and we've basically got nothing new. Now we know that they put warnings out on top of Mount Rainier, Mount Shasta, don't eat the snow. High aluminum content, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't eat the snow in Mount Rainier, what about the water down on Lake Worth? You know, they are poison. All they'd have to do is send a couple of jets up, force one of those things down, bring them down at a public airport, put the press around them, put the scientists in there, and find out what they're spraying.
Mm-hmm.
They won't do that.
Well, I show in my video where chemtrails are mentioned in the report, but they're not to try to ban the use, but it doesn't say that they're being used. So I put that in there because it is a House resolution, and because Congress is talking about chemtrails, you can't say they don't exist. Because, I mean, okay, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I use the word chemtrail. Here's where the Congress mentions it in their House resolution, trying to ban the use of chemtrails. But it doesn't say that if they're actually being used or toxic or anything. But I show that in my video, too. In fact, the Kissinger report talks about chemtrails for depopulation. That's what, 1974?
Yes.
I forgot what they call it, but if you type in the Kissinger report, it's in there. You know, the Civil War, back to that, is the only war I've ever seen in history that has basically never had a peace treaty signed afterwards. Want to know why? It's Section 33 of the martial law jurisdiction for the Civil War. Requires a treaty of peace to be signed among the states to relinquish that jurisdiction. That's how they went in 2 years after the war ended with the Reconstruction Act against the will of the president. But the martial law jurisdiction has never been relinquished properly.
So what happened?
What happened? Orders that everybody complains about today are enforced for that jurisdiction. You want to fix that problem? Somehow we need a treaty of peace among the states to relinquish this jurisdiction. That could possibly solve something. What was you saying, sir? I'm sorry.
Well, what do we do? What direction do we go? Now, I've been in the Patriot movement for a long time. It is just as divisive as anything else. I mean, people are pointing fingers at, well, you know, Clay, he smokes pot. You know, you can't send him any money because he'll spend it on pot. You know, yeah. And don't send Rush Limbaugh any money. He'll spend it on pharmaceuticals. They are trying to poison us. I'm trying to wake people up.
Well, you're trying to wake people up. Don't send the government any money because they're spending it on chemtrails. Hey, that's a good idea. Don't send Rush Limbaugh any money because they'll spend it on pills. And don't send the government any money because they'll spend it on chemtrails. I like their ideology.
We've had people on that started a well-organized, well-regulated American militia site. He's working with the sheriff to put the militia back into proper perspective, so that the militia operates to back up the sheriff, the one legal constitutional law enforcement officer. He's under attack in Delaware. Joe Biden's son.
Well, yeah, they would be constitutional law enforcement officers, but the only problem is, well, actually, I got three problems with that.
Okay.
It's one, all law and partial laws were repealed with the adoption of UCC in 1948, and that's Title 27 makes it clear. It's funny, I give you the exact quotes. Code of Federal Regulations, Title 27, 72.11. All crimes, state or federal, it don't make a crap which one, gun control, drugs, rape, murder, every doggone last one of them, a traffic citation, or commercial crimes. If all laws and partial laws were repealed with adoption of UCC in 1948, and federal law now says, or federal codes, so all crimes are now commercial crimes, and we don't have a constitutional law enforcement officer. We have a commercial crime enforcer, or a municipal corporate ordinance officer. And I'm sure his sheriff's department is a corporation. I just showed you where Washington, D.C. declared, or you can steer them. I've told you, I can get the document off my website, their Gas Act of 1871. Last page of it, where Washington, D.C. declared himself to be the owner and head successor of all said corporations and property of said corporations, and his sheriff's department is corporated. I guarantee you. What you think your government is from coast to coast is the cumulative effect of over 250,000 plus municipal government corporations. Most of them are foreign shareholders. And the Sheriff's Department, especially since Executive Order 12803, privatizing all these little corporate agencies. And really, so how's he a constitutional law enforcement officer if he's a corporate property owned by another corporation? And there's no real law since 1948. If all crimes have been commercial crimes. As a matter of fact, the real courts, the Constitution set up, Article 3, Section 2 of the United States Constitution set up courts in law and equity. There's not an Article 3 court in this country. In 1857, they set up a new court system in equity at law under a loop circumvent in the Constitution again, with Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4, where Congress has authority to enforce the laws of the United States. Well, 4 years before they incorporated Washington, D.C. as the United States to set up the court system for this. A year after that, they set up the citizenship for this. 9 years before that, in 1862, they set up, they redefined the meaning of the word person to include the definition corporation. In 1864, I have a document right below that on Dirty Uncle Sam, where they redefined the meaning of the word state to include the definition District of Columbia. So when you're a citizen of a state, your corporate personhood rests in Washington, D.C. You're a citizen of Washington, D.C. So in Washington, D.C., according to an 1864 Congressional Act, also includes the definition of state. So could it possibly be the entire country that citizens of the United States only has 3 electoral college votes and no representation in Congress? That's a heck of a perspective to look at it. But we're all definitely citizens of a 10-mile strip, which Congress has complete jurisdiction over thanks to a loophole in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, that gives them the authority to create that district and have jurisdiction over by making us subject to that jurisdiction and privatizing everything. We don't have a constitutional law enforcement officer in this country. We haven't been under the Constitution in over 100 years. How do we have one?
How do we do?
We got a Santa Claus with the whole herd of slaves he rents out every year. If there's no such thing as Santa, how's he written slaves? Slaves.
Bruce, I've commented sometimes. You know, can you give me a date, just a generalization of a date when it was easy to be free?
Before the 14th Amendment. You see, to the 14th Amendment, remember Article 3, Section 2 created courts in law and equity, that's civil and criminal. All your courts now are Article 1, Section 8 courts. before the 14th Amendment. The citizenship, I found Article 4, Section 2, says what? The citizens of every state shall be entitled to the same privileges and immunities as the citizens of the several states.
So
Now the word citizen, the second word in the state, in the sentence, and privileges and immunities in that first sentence are capitalized. Paragraph 1, 14th Amendment, which is never properly ratified, those words are lowercase, because you're no longer the constitutor of such. Well, as you saying, sir?
What you're saying is that we've been under martial law. We've been under basically one world government.
Well, the government said it. Matter of fact, there's a 1974 Senate report that says we've been under martial law since 1933, if not going back to the Civil War. The Senate report number 93-549. It came out the first session of Congress, 1973, 93rd Congress. It says we've been under a state of so I ain't saying it.
Okay,
I'm just letting you know what they're saying, and the people don't seem to know.
All right, sir. What do we do about if our courts are corrupted by the titles of nobility, our lawyers are controlled by the British accredited registry, and I believe they're located in the same city of London that the Rothschild's banking headquarters is in.
Yeah, they're too rich to walk far. You know that.
What's that?
They're too rich to walk far. We know that.
and they control, the Rothschild bought Reuters, and they control AP, they control the television stations. So nobody, I would be willing to bet, nobody wanted to debate you. None of your politicians, because you get a politician. One of my favorite things to do, Bruce, is to go to one of these parks, and you got a politician speaking, and he's talking about our great democracy. And I stand up and say, excuse me, sir, what year did our republic turn from a republican to a democracy? What Congress passed that? And strange thing happens. The cameras all shut. The cameras all shut off. The politician disappears, and you got a bunch of people standing around scratching their head, going, "What just happened?"
They're giving Academy Awards out in Hollywood for a long time. The folks in Washington have been neglected. That's not right.
I think so. Now, what the fact is, I mean, I've got a friend. That's here, and we met a couple of years ago. She's helped me type my novels in, and she voted for Obama. She's a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat. I used to think that the conservatives were really the way to go, and gave them a lot more support than the liberal Democrats. But the conservatives wanted to put me in jail because I smoke pot. The Democrats wanted to get me loose. This lady is one of the sweetest women I know, and all the conservatives I know, are kind of uptight and not very kind to anyone. It's divide and conquer again. They got these people arguing over small details when what we all are to be saying, do we want to be free Americans?
You know what's even funnier than that is I read an Ebony magazine one time, and an article in the Ebony magazine talked about the Republican Party being formed in 1854 because the Democrat Party wanted to make the Louisiana Purchase pro-slave territory. A lot of people left the Democrat Party because of that purpose and joined the Republican Party in 1854. Now, we got all these civil rights movements and Jesse Jackson and all these other folks, and they're all Democrats. But if you go back to what, and I don't think Ebony magazine would be lying, but if you go back to 1854, and Ebony magazine
that some things are just wrong. Why is that? Could it be you have a heart for truth? This is Truth Radio, both.com and .info.
Learn something?
All right. You got that taken care of. Got that one taken care of. And let me get Bruce back on.